Ben, good afternoon. Welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm glad to finally get to talk to you about, well, Polish hockey, a shared passion of ours.
Yeah, 100%. I think we'll get into that very deeply today and wanted to share with the audience that even though you and I have been in touch for maybe 10 years, 9 years, I think we were just saying around the time you started Polish Puck, mainly DMing on Instagram when like I'm at matches, like giving you commentary, us chatting back and forth what we're seeing. This is only the second time we've spoken in real life.
Yeah, the Polish hockey community is a small one, and you only get like so many games a year, so there's not really a huge chance to meet everyone, see everyone, and like get to have like those long like times to spend together.
And we'll come back to this at the end too. We'll cross our fingers now, and then at the end that we get to meet in Sosnowiec in 2026 at the World Championships, which is still a long ways away. I think most importantly, the team is competitive. But we'll get into that. We'll bounce around a little bit in terms of the structure, but wanted to share for the audience that the outcome for today's episode is to help educate and inspire them how your passion for sport, specifically ice hockey, and then tied to your heritage in terms of Polish background and overall passion of like spreading the news of Polish hockey outside of Poland and in English in terms of a project is something that people can consider themselves. Like this is actually a data project, is what we'll learn today. There was a lot of data involved that's quantitative from statistics and numbers, and maybe more of it qualitative in terms of the conversations you have with various folks in the ecosystem. So I'm super excited about that because I mean, one, it's about Polish puck, and then two, we can weave in the data components that again hopefully can inspire others to get started on a project like this too. Because at the end of the day, it's just about telling stories. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I do this for is when I go through everything I've done in hockey, there were plenty of times where I could have said, this project's run its course. I've learned everything I want to learn. But for me, it's really that kind of thing of there's so many people in Polish hockey who, despite it being an environment where there's not that money, there's not that fame or things associated with it, like there might be in other countries, they're still so passionate about it. They're out there every day doing everything they can to try to grow the sport.
Yeah, and we'll get into some of those tidbits and stories and some of the relationships that you've been able to develop with players, coaches, staff, both in Pizza around Pizza, but also North America, and then tie it to how you got a job. Pretty sweet job, actually. But let's talk about like your background. So, you're from the Michigan area or Detroit area, I believe. How did you get started? Like, where did this all come from?
Yeah, so I'm from the Michigan area, born and raised, still living just south of Detroit. And there's a huge Polish population over in this area, the Midwest. You also got Chicago, that's the same with that. And for me, a big part of it was even though all my family's from Poland, my mom was actually adopted by a Canadian. My grandpa Bob, he played junior hockey in Canada with Bobby Clark and everything, so he has all those stories. And that's how I got into hockey. If when we talk to like my Polish family, they don't know nothing about hockey. There's not an interest there.
Same.
They know it as a Canadian thing. So I grew up playing hockey. That's just one of those Michigan things you do here. And it really was not until I was in high school. I was in technical middle college, so I got to take college classes instead of high school classes for an amazing program in Washtenaw. And one of the classes, it might not be great to say on a data podcast show, was one about using this data program, and it was, I'll be honest, a really boring class. We were in that class for like 3 hours every day, and it was just a guy basically reading from the manual. And in that class, every day, what I started doing is I found out about elite prospects, and I started going on that site every single day, and I was just like learning so much about hockey. And then I found the Polish Hockey League, and I'm like, well, hey, I'm Polish. Like, this is all where my family's from. I didn't know we had hockey. Like, okay. And I started learning more and more about it, and this was right during, this was in December, so it was during the World Juniors times where, that top division, it's the big show every year, Canada, USA, all them squaring off, the huge games. Well, the Division 1 Group B tournament does not get that same kind of coverage, but I found it on IHF.com, and I was just sitting there updating the live box score ticker. There was no live stream, nothing like that, and I was trying to find more. I'm like, "Well, who are these guys? Like, are any of these good prospects? Like, are these gonna be going to the NHL? Are they gonna be going to the CHL? Like, they're gonna be playing Sweden, Russia? Like, what do we got here?" And I quickly learned there's nothing. You maybe find one or couple articles, remember the couple Polish NHL players in the 90s, one of them did an episode of a version of The Nanny in Poland. It's like, that's what you find. You wouldn't find any actual coverage on Polish hockey, so I said, "Well, I guess I gotta do it myself then."
Yeah, and speaking of that, in the 90s, I mean, I grew up here in the Boston area, in Dorchester specifically. And when I was living in Poland, I believe Mayor Menino changed this area to be called the Polish Triangle. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. And so people forget too that in Boston, pretty big Polish community. And that's how I got into really caring about the Bruins and ice hockey was because Meyer Shakowski was on the team. In third grade, got to meet him because they came to the Boys and Girls Club. He, Joseph Stumple, I think Scott Bailey was maybe the backup or third string goalie. You know, a
That's
few
a
of them.
those are some legendary name pulls right
Yes.
there.
I have, like, I actually have the pictures. This might not show up very well, but we'll try. So I had the picture here. Me and a very young Mariusz signing some things for me. This was like, again, very young. I had shared with one of the current players in the national team, Pavel Zygmunt's father, this. And nodding at me, he's like, send me that photo when you get home. I'm going to send it to him. And he's just like, wow, I looked so young. But I think the point is coming back to it with Polish hockey in general and like people's awareness of it, at least in the US, it was like Krzysztof Oliwa and Mario Shakowski. And you didn't really think of anybody else because, like, to your point, they weren't there.
Mhm.
They weren't there. And so, in terms of the, tying the interest in terms of the sport with the Polish culture and the heritage and the course and the data, like, how did you take that from idea to make it a real thing? Like what was like one of the first things you did to get started? Was it the YouTube channel you have now? Was it the website? Can you kind of talk us through that in terms of the first steps?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in that era, I think, and it's still probably what's going on today where every kid wants to be some kind of content creator. When I was young, it was a YouTuber. Now it's probably TikTok, Instagram, Reels creator. I don't know if YouTuber's still the most popular, but that's what I was doing. Like me and my friends would make YouTube videos. They'd be really cringy hockey ones that I'm thankfully are no longer to be found anywhere. Sorry to anyone who wants to look them up. But it was just creating content. So I was like, well, I can do this. I can just create YouTube videos, talk about this stuff, creating Twitter account. Like the Twitter account was active before there was ever even a website or anything like that. Cause I knew, like, just even, again, we're talking about like where this Polish heritage is very prominent in the US. It's in the hockey market. So, again, like we talked about Boston, that's a hockey market. Chicago, that's a hockey market. Michigan, that's a hockey market. Where hockey's popular in the States is also probably where there just happened to be a large portion of Polish immigrants. It just worked out that way. And because of that, I realized, like, hey, there's a lot of people. I don't know if you had this growing up playing hockey or anything, but I knew when we got the names on the back of our jerseys, like Krzywicki, Pawalczak, all these Polish names, they weren't fitting well. They weren't, the jerseys weren't made to have long Polish last names on
No,
them,
no, no, not at
especially for
all.
kids.
Not yeah, no. And then again, I mean, it was a different time than now, and I don't know what it's like to be a kid, nor do I have them myself. But I've been Mike P or Prue or Pruch since probably 6, 7 years old, like first grade when I started playing, and people are like, we're not even trying. And
Yeah.
at the time, I was like, that's okay. I'll make it easier for you. And then when I was able to connect with my roots, meaning go to Poland for the first time as an adult and live there, I was like, no, like my name is Pruchniewski. It's not Prue. It's not P. Like that is my name. I think there's a lot of pride that comes behind, coming where you're from, and it's something where the culture and the people have a lot of pride in that, especially those who are in Canada or North America or anywhere else. And I think like maybe if we had some more polls that had made it from the Polish leagues, the NHL. It could be a little bit different. They might be more household names. And actually, like you see some of these names in the NHL now. So maybe jumping ahead a little bit, but let's talk about that actually. Like, because you track this, right? You track the hockey players that have the heritage. Like, there are a handful, actually, of top players in the NHL today that have Polish heritage, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, the big name that stands out is Zach Werenski, probably one of the top 5 defensemen right now in the world. And, it's special for him. He got to play against Poland and, he got to talk about it after his game at the World Championships. He thought he was amazed by the crowd. And I'm sure there has to be something where when you have that heritage I mean, as much as he was the enemy in a sense for that game. And I mean, you can contest the Polish fans in Ostrava. They were ready to tear the roof off that place. It was a wild atmosphere. But, you know, he got to play in front of them, and that's what you see with a lot of these players, you know, when we talk about one of the coolest things I've got on this blog, there's a lot of players who reach out to me and then, you know, they're interested in Polish puck and they wanna know more about what's going on over there. And then one of the coolest ones I got to do was, if you remember Mark Borowiecki, former Ottawa Senators, Nashville Predators physical defenseman, he actually has Polish citizenship. He got it after he retired, though, so fortunately could not lace up for the national team during his playing days. But, you know, I got to connect with him. You know, he told me that he's been following all of it. And in the end, we ended up doing a piece together where he evaluated members of the Polish national team and their performance in Ostrava, which was a really cool thing to do. As, you know, he works now as an NHL development coach in the Predators organization.
Okay.
And, you know, I always believe that I can continue learning and getting more in depth about learning hockey. And then just having him talk and hearing him talk about players and all these small little details in the game that he notices, it really makes you feel like I want to almost want to say, like, you know nothing. Just hearing someone so smart talk about it and break it down. And then you watch it and you see it and you're like, how did I not see this before? Like, just even those small conversations, I feel like I became so much better at analyzing hockey just from getting to like meet people who are interested. I mean, there's been coaches who work in the NCAA, junior hockey, NHL, scouts. So many people have just wanted to say, like, hey, I love my heritage. I want to do something. I want to be involved. Even if it's just, how can I help you break this something down? So many people too just offer their help because they're so proud of their heritage. And I think that's, you know, as a result, as we said, it's all in the hockey markets. And it's for a lot of people, they've had this Polish heritage. They don't know how to really proceed with or how to really go about it. You know, they might just be one of those people who's like, yeah, I love pierogi and we had kielbasa and sauerkraut growing up. But they've not really gone deeper than that. You know, they've never visited the country. Um, and they've never, you know, they don't speak Polish. So this is their way to kind of find that connection and really start to build it. These people stay connected. You know, I wouldn't be offended if they said, oh, yeah, this was our one time talking and good thing because they already gave me tremendous value. And it was just an honor to get to talk to them. But no, so many of them want to keep knowing and want to stay involved in Polish hockey. I almost have like a newsletter that I send out every single time I make a big announcement for Polish puck of, hey everyone, here's this like news like Warsaw's back, and they want to know it. They want to be kept in the loop.
Yeah, that the last part, I hope they do, because when I was living in Warsaw in 2015 and 16, my biggest question was, why is there not a team here? And we don't need to go into the history in terms of the why. It's more of the, if the capital city, and especially now, a lot of immigrants have moved there for jobs, especially because of things like Brexit, et cetera, you know, better opportunity, the economy is getting better. You would think that they would. So that would be a big thing to move it forward. Though I wanted to go back to something that you said in terms of these people reaching out to you. Like, was that always the case, or did that really, I guess, escalate to come to the pinnacle of Ostrava in 2023 when the spotlight, not just nationally here, but maybe globally, was on Polish hockey?
Yeah, I mean, for the first few years, and this is what I would, you know, say as like an advice thing to anyone is keep doing something. Just keep grinding on it because for the first few years that I was doing Polish puck, I mean, I think, you know, we've been talking, you probably found me maybe a year or two in. But you were a rarity in that. Not a lot of people knew what I was doing or were following what I was doing. You know, there were when I started the Facebook page, it was probably just bless her, my mom liking the Facebook post, supporting me with it. There was not a lot of attention on it, and it really took a long time to continue to grow and grow. And I think it really started to turn around was, you know, he just retired, and it's a shame how his career ended up finishing. But John Murray, who has an extremely interesting hockey path,
Legend. So
legend.
legend. We'll pause there and say, you know, thank you to a legend for Polish hockey in terms of what he's done for the national team, and now he's a goalie coach at Sosnowiec or Zręgłębie Sosnowiec. But didn't mean to interject though. I think that just needs to be said for those that don't know. Look him up. But for those who do not know John Murray, give us some of his backstory because that is a phenomenal story.
Yeah, John Murray was once probably one of the better American goaltending prospects in the USA. He was the OHL goaltender of the year with Kitchener. And he looked to be a guy who was going to sign a professional contract in the Columbus Blue Jackets organization, suffers an injury. Then, by the time he's healed, his final junior year, he gets traded again because his Kitchener had too many overagers. And it just kind of starts this, I don't want to say like spiral, but it definitely interrupted his development. And so he's playing minor league hockey in the US, the ECHL and what used to be the Central Hockey League when that was around. He had 1 year in Serbia too, and he just wasn't really building that momentum to get to the American Hockey League or take that next step. So he comes to Poland. He signs for 1 year. All the thing is this is going to be a stepping stone season for him. He can play well in Poland, and maybe then hopefully he can get to Czechia, Slovakia, one of those better leagues. And that's really what actually ended up happening is he got that contract, but a Czech team's relegated, so he has to stay in Poland. He signs with the Pole. And then kind of, I guess to say the rest is history. He finds the love of his life in Poland. He ends up playing for like the next 10 years in Poland. He just becomes a legend of the national team. One of the greatest performances I think you'll ever see in hockey is John Murray versus Belarus. I want to say 46 save shutout gives Poland, it's not Miracle on Ice in terms of notoriety, but it's got to be up there with some of the biggest upsets in hockey history.
And then also, we don't need to say the broadcast or if this was IIHF that had it, but I believe his save against the US, against the US in Ostrava was one of the top 10 saves of the tournament. So he definitely had some shining moments there that must have been, for him, like phenomenal. I mean, for me growing up as a kid, when I got Polish citizenship, I was like, I want to play for Poland. I want to play against the US. Obviously, I didn't become a hockey player, which is okay. And didn't need to be. I get to watch it from a different perspective. And to your point, like the more people you can connect with and speak to that have different perspectives, it helps you build perhaps a clearer picture of what's the reality of it.
Yeah, I mean, and like just to go finish with Murray too, really quick, like he made the saves of that tournament. He showed off that he's one of the better goalies in international hockey. I remember, I think it was Seth Jones we got to do media with, and Seth Jones was like, I didn't know he was an American. I was just like, this Poland, they got some goalies over here in Poland. Like, we can't beat him.
Yeah, that he and I have chatted just briefly. Hope to get him on an episode to talk about actually goaltending from a data perspective, and that's all I'll say because I don't want to ruin it. And when he was giving me his point of view, I thought like I've never, I mean, not a goalie though. That's fascinating. I want to talk to you, but obviously he now has the job with Zagłębia. So shout out John Murray. Maybe we'll get you on in the future. But no, that's one that definitely we should note in terms of the especially more recent history for Polish hockey, and especially from your perspective in terms of the storytelling. And then, what are your thoughts on this? Has he and those who were there with him, around him in terms of the team, because as we know, it's the ultimate team sport, have they helped set Poland in the upwards trajectory? Or where are they at these days from from the Polish puck perspective, so your own eyes?
Yeah, I think it's one thing to sell because a lot of viewers, they might not know about Polish hockey. It's not in a great place. And I say that very lovingly. I wouldn't dedicate my time so much if I didn't love it. But there's a lot of problems in Polish hockey, and that create a very unstable development. I mean, again, there's a reason, you don't see those NHL players. But when we're talking in terms of Polish hockey, we're not really talking, let's try to get NHL players. We're still talking, can we get guys who can go to the KHL, to the SHL, to Switzerland? Like, it was really funny when you go back to those games at Ostrava, you had teams literally, I don't think USA or Sweden maybe only had 1 or 2 guys who weren't NHL players versus a country whose best player was like a fourth liner in the Czech league. Like it's a massive difference in talent. And one of the things though that I think a lot of people saw at that tournament as well is there's a lot of guys in Polish hockey who just never really left Poland. They could have been playing in these better leagues. I mean, one of the another fascinating stories about too when you just don't want to overlook a player because the data or especially now we look at age curves. Seeing Kalush, excellent skater, drafted by the Minnesota Wild in I think 2000 exactly, maybe 2001. Had a few stints in Europe and North America, didn't really go well at first. Came back to Poland, was a legend in Poland. Poland again kind of came to this like closed off place during like the 2005 to 2015, almost like a decade around there, where not many imports besides some Czechs and Slovaks were coming in, a lot of Russians. But once the Finnish people started to really take a hold in the Polish Hockey League, they saw Kalous and they were like, we got to get this guy to the Liga. Or, like, he's a
Yeah.
player who can play at this level. And I think you hold the same. Another recent retirement for Poland, the captain Dubinsky, he was a very similar way. I think he was one of the most underrated players in Europe. Again, like even last year, he was 36, 37. He put up 6 goals in 6 Champions Hockey League games playing against those top level European clubs. And that's always been a thing for Polish hockey where they don't have these players who have the resume that maybe say, "Oh yeah, this is a country that compete." It's just though those guys were saying in Poland, maybe an ad here for Polish tourism. The country's nice, the cost of living is low, and the pay in the Polish hockey league is decent enough.
Yeah, that I was going to bring that up earlier when you mentioned how some of these folks in North America that have the heritage never gone. I mean, I'll do that too. Like, if you have not gone, go. If you want any advice or tips, feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to help anyone experience what I was able to 10 plus years ago. And even now that I've been back in the US for a better part of 6 years, I go back a couple times a year. It's a very beautiful place. And it just ties to like in terms of what you want as the player, right? What you want as an athlete, to your point. And I was thinking about this morning because the Continental Hockey League like rounds and schedules were released of the again, some of the guys, we don't have to like name the names necessarily. They left Poland, maybe played another league in Europe for a year or two. And then the short story of why they came back was just like, I guess, cultural fit. Like they just preferred to be in Poland, right? It's their
Uh-huh.
choice. And I want to bring that back to the data perspective, because as we know in hockey, a lot of stats, a lot of data, a lot of advanced metrics, right? A lot of what you do is, of course, sifting through that, but also the qualitative components. And what I'm about to say ties to the episode prior to this with Jacob, who played tennis at Michigan. And for those that did not hear that episode, at least one, check it out. Jacob's got a fantastic story in terms of his tennis career and the differences from high school to college. But he was saying how in college, there's a lot of advanced analytics that they would have based on their own play. And then coaches would do scouting of opponents to have a playbook or a game plan, so to speak. And I asked him, like, okay, what about high school? Is this similar in high school? And he just like shakes his head and laughs. He's like, you don't have like data on these players in these random tournaments in random places. You just have to go out there and play and get a feel for what's happening. And I referenced this episode without giving away too much, where I said, like, hey, we're going to talk about something similar with you. I didn't reference it to you, but with you,
Uh-huh.
Ben and Polish Puck, because you and I have talked about how people came to you, we'll call them scouts or what have you, staff at teams to say, like, hey, this guy's got these stats. Like, what are they like as a player? Because I have no footage on them. So, can you just speak to, again, from like the data perspective, tying to the work you do, of like maybe why it's difficult to just look at box scores and stats when it's really hard to compare even league to league within Europe, never mind outside of it?
Yeah, I think, that's something that's been I don't want to say it's a huge issue, but I know it's very prominent, especially when we're talking about players signing in Europe. They're looking at that resume. I get tons of guys who, I have Polish heritage. I want to go play in Poland, but the clubs aren't looking at me. And I'm like, well, yeah, they're looking for ECHL. They don't care what you do there, what you played there, how it was. They just want that on like your league prospects page or what a hockey DB, whatever you want to use. And there becomes a lot of problem with that. I think even when we're just looking at those stats, I can speak to Poland. Unfortunately, in Poland, you've had some clubs that are very poor financially. For anyone who wants to see like the craziest league you can find, sometimes it's the fact that you have clubs in Poland where they're signing guys who have NHL experience, who have top European experience. They are professional clubs. They're playing in the same league as like a team that's like, okay, we're trying out some guys who played NCAA. We got some guys who play amateur Slovak, just trying to see who can fit and, I guess to say almost have warm bodies for the team, basically, is where they're at. So you get these ridiculous scores. I mean, I remember I've covered some games that hit 20 to nothing in a hockey game at the top level of a country. And that's where it becomes where you have a problem with data sometimes, where if you don't look into this deeper, I don't want to, yeah, we're going to avoid player names because I don't want to disparage a player who's a free agent right now. But we have a player who's a top scorer in Poland. He was one of the best this year. He has tons of goals, tons of assists. It looks great. He dominated. One big problem. Most of those points came against the worst team in the league. You remove those points, and suddenly he's a pretty average scorer in the league, especially maybe even below average for what they expect out of a top line import. And that's where, these data things can just sometimes harm. And especially, I think, when we look at European prospects, not every country is the same as extreme as Poland, but it's what do players actually do in these games against these lower teams? Who are their points coming against? What's the value of a player maybe who's playing in Sweden who has 8 points in 42 games versus a player who has 12 and 20? but that player who has 12 and 20 is playing a team that's facing relegation. They're facing a lot of bankruptcy problems. I mean, these financial problems are prevalent along among European teams. It's which one has more value there, the one who actually was getting a consistent role, playing a lot in Sweden, developing and finding ways to score in that low role, or the one who just got some ice time bump because, hey, we're playing this garbage team, just let the young guys play.
Yeah,
Because that's what we see in Poland is some teams let the young guys play those garbage games. Other teams are like, hey, we're running up the score today. Everyone get your points in.
percent. And as you mentioned, this is not just something that's manifesting itself within PZHL and the Toruń Hockey Liga in Poland. You have other federations that have similar issues at the national level and also club level. And I've heard from some folks in the Nordics that some of these games it's similar based on the team's budgets or financial position. Like they have guys playing fourth line that like would never make the team, but it's just like a cost thing. So I think the lesson there from my perspective, like being a data guy, and clearly you are a data guy too, it's like the context matters. If you just look at the data points in isolation, even if they're pristine in terms of being accurate, if you don't ask the right questions of like, what does this mean? Or what happens if I change this a little bit? You could get to very, very, very bad conclusions. And it's probably stuff you talked about in that class that you found to be
Yeah.
so boring that you were sitting there that you're now there that you're now using today. So it's I think another lesson there is that for those who are in school today, like you said, like if you have a passion for something, just do it. Get started. Like a lot of the stuff that you're learning in classes, whether it's theoretical or practical, can be applied. And then many of us learn by doing. We learn by
Uh-huh.
just doing it and doing it and doing it. And I remember like you and I were writing back and forth earlier this year or last year, this year, when Poland didn't advance from 1A out of Romania. And I'm not putting words in your mouth, but you're like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. And I said, I've been going at this for 10 years. So this was the ninth year I've been to World Championships. So Snubbits will be 10. And this jersey's from 2015, first jersey I've ever had. I think I have 9 now, which some will say is 9 too many. But then you came back to me and you're like, no, I'm going to keep doing it because like the stories have to be told, right? The stories have to be told. Like people should know so they could learn from it.
Yeah, 100%. It was that one day of like, especially when, international hockey can be cruel, especially when you're covering a national team because, it's if you're covering like an NHL team, you got 82 games a year. You lose one, it's like, okay, whatever. And then, yeah, towards the end of the year, you start to have those conversations of, was this season a failure? Was this a success? And at the end of the day, only one team goes home happy. The team that won the Stanley Cup is the only one who's ever happy at the end of the year. International hockey, you got 5 games. You have 5 games that matter all year. Upsets happen. Last year at the World Juniors, if Latvia and Canada U20 play each other like in an 82 game NHL schedule, yeah, throughout that year, Canada's going to win most of those matchups when they get each other. But the upset happened. Latvia won. And, at the top level, you have enough games where, okay, one upset doesn't ruin your tournament. When you're down at the lower levels, you got 5 games. One upset, there's your tournament. That's it. We go to like the women's world championship side. Poland had a rough start against Spain, team they were supposed to beat, a team they beat in the expedition game prior to the Worlds. That one game, it's over. It does not matter because you have such a small sample. And that also makes, even with data, harder to judge players and who had success and not.
It's another
How much.
it's another data lesson too. I wanted to make sure they get that in is that yes, you can do all the analysis that you want. Players still have to play when you have small sample size of games. So five game round robin tourney, no playoff. It's like some of that you throw out the window and you got to go out there and win. And, players got to play. So the data is important though in certain situations, like actually not at all.
Yeah, it's one thing I've talked to the Polish national team during my time. I think had 6 head coaches. I've had the opportunity to talk to all but one of them, and one of the things that's really interesting to me is how they do go about that kind of idea of this is like, who's an international gamer, and well, who are you taking because they're doing great in their club year? There's some guys who dominate the club league and then never sniffed the national team in Europe. And then there's guys who are like, if you just go on that box where it's like, this guy's got 8 points playing in like an ECHL level league, why is he out there? And then you go out there and see, it's like, oh, okay, I can see it now. Like I can see the role he's playing. Like you can see it. I mean, for Poland, that's a lot of their guys, I think, would apply to that.
Yeah, it's like something there that you reference matters too. And it's a conversation I had actually this week, not for these episodes, but with a former teammate. He was like, you can't have like a locker room of 20 of the same player. It doesn't work necessarily. And then you go back to like Miracle on Ice, the US team in 1980 was like same thing. They took the team that they needed. And so it's like, how do the parts fit? And it's similar in terms of like, I believe from you, in terms of people you talk to, like some person might give you some information and you know, like the context of what that source is, like, oh, I'll take that with a grain of salt. Somebody else might sound something where you're like, that's crazy, though you know it's very solid, right? And then you, for yourself, as I see it, and like some of the, I guess, back channel stuff you and I go back and forth on, it's like you then have to sift through the data and be like, how do I piece this together to tell a compelling story?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, in Polish hockey, it's a crazy world, and I think these are two stories that we've laughed at a lot over these years. You never know what's going to hit the inbox in a given day. From someone telling, I got a text one time from a player saying, "Hey, one of our teammates just got arrested. He is a Russian spy," to receiving a league transaction thing that said a dog had been signed. You never know what you're going to get in
Unreal.
in Polish hockey, and that also makes it okay. I think it's remembering everyone has biases. And so what is their bias when telling you this information? What are
Yes,
they
yes.
trying to do? Because, when we talk about Polish hockey, you gave the example at the high school level, there's not all those fancy stats. I can tell you, yeah, there's no fancy stats in Poland as well. No one's doing tracking data. I don't got speed, foot speed, anything like that. So you're really relying on stats. And then the other part of it is that qualitative stuff. And it's going to every coach, teammate, scout. What are they saying about these people? And it's for me, it's kind of like almost to say like looking for patterns. So, I ask about player X. Okay, coach A says he's a hard worker, he has a great shot. Teammate B says, guy's lazy, guy's a bum, can't do anything. So who do you
Context
trust in that
matters.
situation? You almost have to rank these things. But then okay, so then, saying that
Well,
player
they
asked
could.
another
Well,
person.
they could both be right. The
Yeah.
both of those people could be right. It's perspective and context.
Yeah. And because one of the things I do every year at Polish Puck is we have a huge prospect rating because no one else is going to rank these prospects coming out of Poland. And every year it's the most difficult thing I do because, again, you're talking about some players where I saw 5 minutes of you play. That's all that's out there for you as a player. That's the only video. And it's probably some video that admittedly their mom put on Facebook that I tracked down because I care too much about this stuff.
I love that. I love that. I mean, I just love that so much. The amount that you care for it is up there with myself, if not more, because you're putting the work. In terms of, in the interest of time, Ben, like we went through a lot here, maybe more than many will care to listen to, but at minimum, I'll be sending this to all the people that I know. I'm sure you'll share this with people you know who care about Polish puck as much as we do. And, hopefully, as I mentioned in the beginning, a takeaway is that somebody gets inspired by this to start their own project. You've given a lot of advice and recommendations throughout. I've given some of my own, just from my own perspective. Is there one like ultimate piece of advice that you would get to someone who's maybe considered to start even like a side project like this, where data is a component and they didn't know what to do? Like, what is that one piece of advice you would give them?
Yeah, I would just say do it. And if you love it, just keep doing it. I know that's already talked about, but just find what you have a passion for and keep investing in it. Because you don't know, every day with Polish Puck, I've gotten to do things where I honed my skills in Photoshop because I'm making thumbnails or I'm making graphics for the site. I got to hone my skills as a writer, as a journalist. When I first started this, there were plenty of journalistic mistakes I made. And, also just do something when you have a project that people find cool or that you think is cool and you're invested in, other people are going to find it cool. Like to this day, I believe one of the reasons I was to get my foot in the door and work in the NHL for the Detroit Red Wings in a public relations role is because I just got lucky enough that, again, being in that Michigan hockey area with Polish
Yeah,
backgrounds,
yeah.
two of the people who are hiring said, wait, there's Polish hockey? I'm Polish. I work in hockey. Well, let's interview this guy to at least learn more about what all this stuff is, you know? And I think it's always been a thing at my job, even when there's not an obvious connection of, oh yeah, this is Polish hockey. People say, so you cover international hockey. What is that like? And all the skills I've just gained from it. Again, those like very technical ones to even just talking about how I've become a more rounded person, getting that international experience and talking to people globally. And that's the thing too, is find what you enjoy. Cause the biggest thing I enjoy is like these connections I've made with like you of just so many people around the world. Like it's a joke with my friends. Anytime that I post I'm somewhere on Polish Puck, someone will DM me saying, "Hey, I love your stuff. Can I buy you a beer?"
Love that. That is awesome. That is like I mean, if not for anything else, I would keep doing it for that. And we'll come back to a part about Detroit in the end. So we've covered off the main part of the episode. Let's have. I mean, we've had fun. Let's have some more fun. Go behind the data. Learn more about Ben, the person. So I'm gonna ask you 4 questions, and we'll see what you think. So let's start with this. Is there a song that gets you into a mood? Or, it could give you the feels. It could get you focused when you're running for Polish puck. Like, what is the go-to song for you and why?
Yeah, it's gonna be kind of a weird one, but it's "Stay by Me" by Misu Makubara. I hope I'm saying that right, but she's a
Okay.
Japanese city pop artist from like the '80s and '90s. So really out there, but I spend a lot of time, as we talked about, doing data stuff, pulling all this information. Again, there's not too many existing databases to pull from. So I listened to a lot of random stuff, and Japanese city pop came on, and it became the song that whenever I'm writing like my year-end preview, it's the first play now because of
Yeah.
that. It's a beautiful song. She has a beautiful voice.
Right.
Anyone hasn't seen it, stay with me. Beautiful song.
We'll link that. I'll link that in the notes for sure, and I'll be checking it out. So thanks for that. Is there a book that you've read in the last year or two that has taught you a lesson or that you found really compelling that you wanted to share with people?
Yeah, for me, the big thing is I am a huge biography fan. I love reading about people's lives and how they navigated it. And recently I finally did Steve Jobs' biography.
Okay.
Amazing one. And I think it really, especially as we're now at a place where, I'm one of those people, I think a lot of tech can be frustrating. We're not designing with the user in mind or how is a user to use this. It's so interesting to see how Jobs went about those years at Apple and when they were designing everything, and how sometimes to his own detriment, he was precise on getting things he wanted because he thought that's what it should be. And that kind of passion for your own product as well.
I mean, I can see from my perspective, I think others will see when they check you out on polishpuck.com and Instagram. I think it's at polishpuck underscore.
Yep.
They will see that too. From my point of view. So thanks for that book. I might have read that one or one about him. So I'm with you when it comes to like the mindset of Steve Jobs, when it comes to user design and experience. Is there a place or location very close to you or near and dear to your heart?
Yes, that's going to be Hastings, Ontario, a small town up there,
Okay.
maybe less than 100 people, home of Dick Clapper, NHL Hall of Famer, and also home to my grandpa. I spent a lot of summers up there. Again, that close personal connection with my grandpa got me into hockey. So going up there and spending at a cottage was a lot of the, I guess, the happiest memories of my childhood. I really wish it would have been somewhere in Poland, given the theme of the episode, but I knew as soon as I read the question, it had to be Hastings, Ontario.
That's the intention of this, is ideally not to put too much thought into it. And I'm not like a favorites person. For some things I do, but other things like I can't. I don't have the answer. So I really appreciate that that's something close to you and can make that connection. And I might guess what the next answer is, though I actually have no idea. Is there a comfort food that you have, whether it's homemade or at a restaurant, that is just something that is your
Yeah, I'm gonna guess your guess would be pierogi. I'm gonna guess something along those lines, maybe a Polish food,
something
but
Polish?
it's actually gonna be taro milk tea, which might be a weird one, but there's so I bought my house about 3 years ago, and went through a job layoff, went through a lot of things with life, and especially even Polish puck, the highest highs the site has had, the highest lows, but it's in within walking distance of me, a boba tea place. And whenever I'm feeling stressed, whenever I'm feeling anything, I just like to go on that 10-minute walk to go get a taro milk tea. And on that walk while drinking taro milk tea, I think I've like figured out so many different things I want to do, or usually come to an answer of what like my next step is for a lot of things in life.
That's amazing. Like genuinely, the whole process and experience and tying it to that specific tea is the amazing part. So I love that you found that. Well, Ben, I appreciate you taking the time. This has been a ton of fun. Said I would mention this earlier. Well, I'll mention it now. I'm coming out to Detroit. We're going to a Red Wings game. Like, we're going to meet in person, and then we'll cross our fingers again the second time that we'll see each other in Sosnowiec, end of April, start of May 2026. Again, Ben, thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, it was an honor. This was so much fun.
Thanks.